What if I told you that the calendar on your wall, the legal system in your courthouse, and even the words you're hearing right now are all direct echoes of an empire that collapsed over 1,500 years ago? From a tiny, unremarkable city on the banks of the Tiber River, Rome grew into a colossal superpower that dominated the known world, stretching from the misty highlands of Scotland to the sun-scorched deserts of Mesopotamia. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're undertaking an epic journey through more than 1,000 years of history to understand the incredible story of the Roman Empire. The tale of Rome's founding is a legendary one, beginning with a refugee from the Trojan War named Aeneas. Centuries later, his descendants, the twin boys Romulus and Remus, were famously abandoned, suckled by a she-wolf, and raised by a shepherd. As adults, they set out to found their own city, but a bitter argument over who should rule led to Romulus killing his own brother. On April 21st, 753 BC, Romulus founded the city of Rome, becoming its first of 7 kings. This early monarchical period laid the groundwork for the future, establishing the Senate as a council of elders and building crucial infrastructure like the city's great sewer, the Cloaca Maxima. But the seventh and final king, Tarquin the Proud, ruled as a vicious tyrant. The breaking point came when his son sexually assaulted a virtuous noblewoman named Lucretia, who then tragically took her own life after making her family swear revenge. A nobleman named Lucius Junius Brutus brandished Lucretia's bloody dagger before the people, and in a furious uprising, the Romans drove Tarquin and his family out of the city forever. In 509 BC, the monarchy was abolished. In its place, the Romans created a revolutionary new government, the res publica, or the, quote, public thing, which we know as the Republic. The core principle of the Republic was to prevent any single man from holding absolute power. Instead of a king, 2 consuls were elected to serve for just 1 year, each holding the power to veto the other. The Senate, an advisory body of experienced former magistrates, held immense influence, controlling finances and foreign policy. But the early republic was defined by a bitter internal struggle known as the conflict of the orders, a fight between the wealthy, land-owning patrician class and the common people, the plebeians. The plebeians fought Rome's wars but were excluded from power and often fell into crushing debt. Their ultimate weapon was a general strike. On several occasions, the entire plebeian population would march out of the city and refuse to fight or work until their demands were met. Through these struggles, they won incredible concessions, like the creation of the Tribune of the Plebs, an official who could veto any act of the Senate, and the publication of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written law code. While sorting out its internal politics, Rome was also relentlessly expanding across Italy. After a humiliating sack of the city by Gauls around 390 BC, Rome reformed its military and began a systematic conquest, eventually becoming the master of the entire Italian peninsula by 272 BC. This brought Rome face to face with the other great power of the Western Mediterranean, the vast maritime empire of Carthage. The resulting conflict, the Punic Wars, was a struggle for survival. The First Punic War was a naval contest. The Romans, who had no navy, captured a Carthaginian warship and reverse-engineered it, building an entire fleet in months. They invented a spiked boarding bridge called the Corvus, which allowed their superior soldiers to fight land battles at sea. Rome won, seizing Sicily as its first overseas province. The Second Punic War was the stuff of legend, a conflict defined by one of history's greatest military minds, Hannibal Barca. Raised to hate Rome, Hannibal executed an audacious plan. In 218 BC, he marched his army, complete with war elephants, from Spain, over the Alps, and into Italy, shocking the Romans. He then inflicted a series of devastating defeats on them, culminating in the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC. There, Hannibal executed a tactical masterpiece, completely encircling and annihilating a Roman army twice the size of his own. It was one of the bloodiest single days in military history, with perhaps 70,000 Romans killed. Any other state would have collapsed, but Rome refused to surrender. They raised new armies and adopted a strategy of attrition. Eventually, the brilliant Roman general Scipio took the war to Africa, forcing Hannibal to return home to defend Carthage. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, Scipio finally defeated Hannibal, and Rome became the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. But this incredible success came at a price. The vast wealth and slave labor pouring in from conquered lands destroyed the traditional Roman way of life. Small farmers were pushed off their land, creating a massive, unemployed urban population. This social crisis led to a century of political violence, civil war, and the Republic's ultimate collapse. It began in 133 BC with the Gracchi brothers, who tried to pass land reforms for the poor, but were murdered by the senatorial elite, shattering a long tradition of political peace. Politics became polarized between the optimates, who defended the Senate's power, and the populares, who appealed to the masses. Then came Gaius Marius, a general who professionalized the army by recruiting from the landless poor. This created a new kind of soldier, one whose loyalty was not to the state but to the general, who promised them land and spoils. The army was now a political tool, and a general named Sulla soon used it to march on Rome itself, starting the first full-scale civil war. He won, declared himself dictator, and posted lists of his enemies in the Forum, offering rewards for their murder. Thousands were killed, and the Republic was mortally wounded. The next generation was dominated by three ambitious strongmen: the general Pompey the Great, the fabulously wealthy Crassus, and the charismatic politician Gaius Julius Caesar. In 60 BC, they formed a private alliance called the First Triumvirate to control the state. As his reward, Caesar was given command in Gaul, which he brilliantly and brutally conquered over 8 years, making him rich and giving him a fanatically loyal army. With Crassus dead, the rivalry between Caesar and Pompey exploded. The Senate, fearing Caesar's power, sided with Pompey and ordered Caesar to disband his army. He knew that if he returned to Rome as a private citizen, his enemies would destroy him. On January 10, 49 BC, Caesar made his fateful choice. He led a legion across the Rubicon River, the boundary of Italy, an act of treason that plunged the Republic into another civil war. He famously declared, "Alia iacta est," the die is cast. Caesar's veteran legions crushed Pompey's forces. By 45 BC, he was the undisputed master of the Roman world. He was made dictator for life and began a series of popular reforms. But his monarchical style offended a group of senators who called themselves the Liberators. On the Ides of March 15, 44 BC, they surrounded Caesar in a meeting of the Senate and stabbed him to death, hoping to restore the Republic. They failed. The assassination sparked yet another civil war. The key players were Caesar's loyal lieutenant, Mark Antony, and Caesar's 19-year-old grandnephew and adopted heir, the brilliant and ruthless Octavian. After defeating Caesar's assassins, Antony and Octavian turned on each other. Antony allied himself with the Egyptian queen Cleopatra, while Octavian skillfully used propaganda to paint Antony as a decadent foreigner. The final showdown came at the naval battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's forces, led by his general Agrippa, were victorious. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they both committed suicide a year later. At age 33, Octavian stood alone, the sole master of the Roman world. The Republic was dead. Octavian, now called Augustus, was a political genius. He knew Romans would never accept a king, so he carefully cloaked his absolute power in the traditions of the old Republic. He called himself Princeps, or First Citizen, while holding the key powers that gave him control of the army and the state. His reign ushered in 200 years of unprecedented peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. He professionalized the army, reformed the civil service, and rebuilt the city of Rome, famously boasting that he, quote, found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. But the system he created depended on the character of the emperor. His successors, the Julio-Claudian dynasty, were a mixed bag. They included the paranoid Tiberius, the insane Caligula who tried to make his horse a consul, the surprisingly effective Claudius who conquered Britain, and the infamous Nero, who allegedly fiddled while Rome burned and launched the first persecution of Christians. Nero's suicide in 68 AD sparked a brief civil war, from which the general Vespasian emerged as the founder of the Flavian dynasty. He restored stability and began construction of a massive amphitheater for the people, known today as the Colosseum. The Flavian dynasty was followed by the so-called Five Good Emperors, a period when the emperor chose his successor based on merit, not blood. This era saw rulers like Trajan, under whom the empire reached its greatest territorial extent, and Hadrian, who consolidated the frontiers and built his famous wall in Britain. The last of the good emperors was the philosopher king Marcus Aurelius, who spent most of his reign fighting off Germanic tribes and dealing with the devastating plague. Tragically, he broke with tradition and named his own cruel and megalomaniacal son Commodus as his successor. Commodus's assassination in 192 AD plunged the empire back into civil war. This led to the rise of the Severan dynasty, military autocrats who openly relied on the army's support. The founder, Septimius Severus, famously advised his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn all other men. His son Caracalla granted Roman citizenship to all free inhabitants of the empire in 212 AD, but mostly to increase the tax base. The murder of the last Severan emperor in 235 AD triggered the crisis of the 3rd century. For 50 years, the empire was nearly destroyed by constant civil war, economic collapse, hyperinflation, and massive invasions from Sasanian Persia in the east and Germanic tribes in the north. The empire even split into 3 separate, warring states. Rome was pulled back from the brink by a series of tough soldier emperors, most notably Aurelian, the restorer of the world. But it was Diocletian, who came to power in 284 AD, who truly saved and transformed the empire. He created the Tetrarchy, a rule of 4, dividing the empire into an eastern and western half, each with a senior and junior emperor to provide for stable succession and defense. This new, openly autocratic state is known as the Dominate. Diocletian's system collapsed into civil war after he retired, but from the chaos emerged Constantine the Great. In 312 AD, before a crucial battle, Constantine supposedly had a vision of a Christian symbol in the sky. He won the battle and subsequently became a patron of Christianity, issuing the Edict of Milan, which granted religious toleration. He also moved the capital of the empire to a new city he founded, Constantinople, shifting the empire's center of gravity to the more prosperous Greek-speaking East. Later, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the official state religion. After his death in 395 AD, the empire was permanently divided between his 2 sons into East and West. The Western Roman Empire was now on a path to dissolution. It was plagued by weak emperors, a ruined economy, and an inability to fund its own army, forcing it to rely on barbarian mercenaries. The final blow came from overwhelming external pressure, driven by the migration of the Huns from Central Asia. In 410 AD, the Visigoths sacked the city of Rome, a massive psychological shock. The final, symbolic moment came in 476 AD. The Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a young boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus. Odoacer simply sent the imperial insignia to the emperor in the east and declared himself king of Italy. There was no cataclysmic event, but rather the quiet end to a long, slow process of decay. The Western Empire had transformed into a collection of Germanic kingdoms. But this wasn't the end of Rome. In the east, the Byzantine Empire would thrive for another 1,000 years. And the legacy of Rome is woven into the very fabric of our world. Roman law is the foundation for most legal systems in Europe. Latin is the mother of French, Spanish, and Italian. Roman engineering marvels, like aqueducts and roads, and their use of concrete, set a standard for millennia. And it was within the Roman Empire that Christianity grew from a small sect into a world religion. The story of Rome is a testament to human achievement and a cautionary tale about the corrupting influence of power. Its rise and fall remains one of history's most important and endlessly fascinating stories. So, what are your thoughts on this? What part of Roman history fascinates you the most? Let us know down in the comments below. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening,